Okay, hello, I'm Vincent Fisher, and we talk to you about the Annie experiments. Next slide. So a small overview of Annie. Here's a picture, a very recent picture of the collaboration taken a few days ago. Annie is the accelerated neutrino-neutron experiment. It's a gallium-loaded water Cherenkov detector that is placed at Fermilab downstream of the booster neutrino beam. The goal of Annie is to measure the production rate of neutrons from neutrino interaction in water as a function of momentum transfer. And the secondary goal is also to deploy and operate LAPPDs in a neutrino experiment. So the experiment, Annie finished taking background data, what we call phase 1, and we are soon to be taking physics data, what we call phase 2, that is funded and currently under construction. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the motivation behind Annie. But let's start with the neutrino interaction at the GeV scale. So during this conference, I'm going to assume that people actually follow the conference, you heard about a lot of different interaction at the GeV scale, from charge current quasi-elastic interaction, or CCQE, to charge current resonant, deep inelastic, coherent interactions. So you can see that at 1 GeV, not all neutrino interaction are CCQE, but most experiments actually care about CCQE interaction when they actually look at their golden data sets or regular data set. So if you want to only select CCQE interaction, you must be able to reconstruct and dismiss any kind of other interaction, such as resonant or inelastic events. So let's start with what I would call a clean CCQE interaction. In neutrino mode, you have a neutrino creating a lepton, in this case a muon, and a proton. And to reconstruct the energy of a neutrino, you apply the following formula. It's quite simple. You just need to know your kinematics, your lepton kinematics quite well, but that's it. However, something that could look like a CCQE interaction, but that is not, and I'm going to call it a CCQE-like interaction, is the same thing, but inelastic. So that would mean that you actually create additional particles in your interaction, in this case, neutrons. And you can imagine that you cannot use, even though in your detectors, such as a liquid argon detector, even though you see the exact same signature as a CCQE interaction, the fact that your neutron took some energy, you cannot use the same formula to reconstruct your neutrino energy, and you induce a bias in your reconstruction. So this is why we decided to build and take data with Annie to study the multiplicity of final state neutrons from neutrino-nucleus interaction in water. So this study is actually useful for different fields, such as proton decay and supernova detection, but I'm going to focus on long-base oscillation physics for now. So as I said, this will allow us to provide a detailed study of those CCQE-like interactions, but also better identify pure CCQE interaction and improve this energy resolution bias that I mentioned. One thing that would be also very important would be to be able to separate neutrino and interneutrino in a beam, because while neutrino create protons in a beam, after an interaction, interneutrino create neutrons. So being sensitive to neutron might help do the separation. And finally, this is also a complementary measurement with the proton multiplicity measurement done in liquid argon. And as you can see on the plots on the right, the energy range of Annie in blue is actually of interest for several other experiments, such as NOVA, DUNE, and hypercane. And the second goal of Annie, the technological goal, is to concern the LAPPD. So what are LAPPDs? LAPPDs are large area picosecond photodetectors. They are 20 by 20 centimeter microchannel plates with a very good time resolution of about 60 picoseconds, and also a very good spatial resolution of less than a centimeter. Annie will be the first use of this new technology in a running neutrino experiment, and that will demonstrate that LAPPDs are actually ready to be commercialized as actual photosensor for high energy physics, the same as regular photomultiplier tubes. So now I'll explain the motivation behind Annie. What is Annie? So here is a picture of the Annie collaboration, a little older picture than the one I showed before, but this one has our very first LAPPD in the center. Annie is a collaboration between 3 countries, the United States, United Kingdom, and Germany. As I said before, Annie is located at Fermilab on the booster neutrino beam. So this is an aerial view of Fermilab, and here is a more detailed view of the BNB, of the booster neutrino beam, with Annie located 100 meters from the BNB horn. And this is a picture of the Annie Hall with neutrino coming from this direction. But if you've been to Fermilab recently, you noted that this is actually not true. This is the SBND near detector hall. This is the Annie Hall. However, even though that looks small, Annie is located 2 stories behind this hall. Well, there, basically. All right, so now the Annie detector located there, as I said, is installed in the Seiben hall on the BNB line. The Annie is a gadolinium-loaded water. The main volume of Annie is a gadolinium-loaded water of 30 tons that is instrumented by about 130 photomultiplier tubes of different radiuses and at least 5 LFPPDs distributed in the tank. The other set detectors of ANI are the front veto. Those are scintillator paddles that are tagging charged particles coming from the beam, because since we want to look at neutrino interaction in the water, we want to tag any kind of neutrino interaction happening upstream in the rock. And the third sub-detector is the MRD, or muon range detector. It's a legacy from Saibun. It's a steel scintillator sandwich detector that we can use to actually reconstruct muon direction and muon direction and energy. And to finish with this slide, an expected number of interaction in ANI, we expect about 14,000 cc charge current interaction per ton per year with nominal beam running. All right, so how will ANI work? So let's start with the beginning. You start with a neutrino interaction in your water, the charge current interaction that would create a muon. Your muon will travel in your water volume and end up in your MRD. The light created by the Cherenkov effect in your water is going to illuminate the LFPPDs, and you will reconstruct direction and the vertex position of the interaction using the LFPPDs. Then the momentum of the muon is going to be reconstructed in the MRD. During this interaction, you maybe will be creating neutrons. Those neutrons are going to thermalize in the water volume and then subsequently be captured on gadolinium. They would create gammas, emit Cherenkov light as well, and be detected by all the photomultiplier tubes we have in the experiment. All right, so I mentioned LFPPDs a lot, but why would ANI actually need LFPPDs? So let's start with a measurement, very similar measurement that was done with the Super Cavalcante experiment. Super Cavalcante actually did this neutron need measurement using atmospheric neutrinos, and you're looking at the visible energies of those interactions. However, Super K had a very low neutron detection efficiency of about 17%, but again, this was before Super K gadolinium. As I said, this is only the visible energy, so the actual neutrino energy and the angle was unknown, especially since those were atmospheric neutrinos. The neutrino flavor was unknown, and the interaction type was also unknown. Those are not just CC3 interactions. So it would be actually very useful to perform the same measurement using a well-known neutrino beam, as well as a detector that's capable of reconstructing muon kinematics and really understand those CC3 interactions. And this is why you need actually LFPPD. They actually drastically improve your vertex resolution, angular resolution, and rate transfer resolution. So why do you need a good vertex resolution? Well, first of all, when you're a detector, you don't detect neutrons every time. You have a certain efficiency of detecting neutrons, and this efficiency depends on the interaction point of the vertex of the neutrino interaction. But if you don't know your vertex, you apply a different efficiency that is actually true, and so you end up with a systematic shift or difference between the actual number of neutrons you detect and the number of neutrons that you expect. Why do you need a good momentum transfer? Well, to get a better kinematic reconstruction for your lepton, your muon. And why do you need a good position resolution for LFPPD? It could be useful to actually detect multi-tracks events and discard inelastic events by actually discarding non-CCQE interaction. All right, so now the phase 1 of ANI, the background phase. So I'm going to present you some of the results. So the background phase was the proof of concept of ANI. This was the measurement of the neutron background rates. And this neutron background has two sources. The first one is the skyshine neutrons. So those are neutrons actually emitted in the beam dump and in the beam horn that would be scattered upwards, go through the air, and then rain down on the detector. And the second source of neutron background in the run from the beam are dirt neutrons. So those are actual neutron interaction happening not in ANI, but in the surrounding dirt or rock. But the neutron created after this interaction could enter ANI in time with the beam. So between March and May 2016, we installed ANI phase 1 in the Cyber Hall, and we took data from June 2016 to September 2017. And as I will show you in the next two slides, the detector configuration was a little different than for the physics run. First of all, the water tank. The water tank is going to be the same. We're going to reuse the water tank, but this time the water tank was filled with unloaded pure water and not gadolinium-loaded water, and equipped with 60 photomultiplier tubes at the bottom. Then the MRD. I mentioned this was a steel scintillator sandwich. The MRD actually has 13 layers, but for phase 1, we only used 2 of those layers because we used them as a veto to tag any kind of charged particle going through a detector, also using in combination with the front veto that you can see here. The front veto is actually operational and it will not be changed for phase 2. And finally, since so far we don't have any neutron sensitive volume, we had what we call the NCV, or neutron capture volume. This is a neutron sensitive volume for phase 1. It's a 50, and I should remove a bullet point here. It's a 50 by 50 centimeter acrylic vessel filled with about 100 liters of gadolinium doped liquid scintillator. This vessel was actually isolated, instrumented with 2 PMTs, and could be moved in the tank to actually take neutron data at different positions in the tank. And this is what I'm going to show now. We actually moved the NCV at several locations in the tank. We did a vertical scan in blue here and a horizontal scan here. Vertical scan would be more sensitive to sky-shine neutrons. Horizontal scan more sensitive to dirt neutrons. And here is the result of this scan expressed in terms of neutrons per cubic meter per sphere, basically. And you can see that the neutron rate at the top of this is the water thickness. So the closer you are to the top of the tank and the closer you are to the side of the tank, you can see that the neutron rate at the top of the tank is actually quite high, but goes down really quickly, which is what you expect for neutrons in water, which means that in our fiducial volume for phase 2, we expect the neutron rate to be less than 2%, and this is not an issue for the phase 2 physics. So phase 2 can actually start, and that's the case. So I'm going to talk about phase 2 now. So for phase 2, we plan on having, of course, a fully operational detector with a new inner structure and additional photomultiplier tube attached to this structure, gallium sulfate in the water, and APPDs, and the fast electronics that goes with those APPDs, and a fully refurbished MRD. So phase 2 is now fully funded and under construction at Fermilab, and so I flew from Fermilab a few days ago, and I'm going to fly back tomorrow to Fermilab to continue the construction. Most PMTs are already on site. They've been and are ready to be tested and installed. The MRD is now fully refurbished, and our high voltage and electronic racks are ready to be populated. And the inner structure is now being welded and mounted to actually hold all those photomultiplier tubes. All right, so now, ANI and APPD. So I want to mention that ANI has been an early LAPPD adopter since the beginning. As you can see on the right, those are design of ANI over time. You can see the very first, very optimistic design with only LAPPDs on those side of the tank. A somewhat more realistic design with LAPPD only on one side. And finally, this design that really looks like the current one. That's really company that are the current manufacturer of LAPPDs, and our collaborators at Iowa State University are independently testing LAPPDs coming directly from the company. We actually received already and tested already 2 of the 5 first LAPPDs that will be deployed in ANI. So here, if you picture those tests, here you can see the Iowa State University test stand for LAPPDs with the very fast laser on top. This is LAPPD 25, the first one we'll be deploying in ANI. A few waveform and gain curve showing you that the LAPPDs are actual working detector. They work perfectly fine and up to specs. And this is a picture of our second LAPPD, LAPPD 31, before and after opening at Iowa State University. And so I mentioned that LAPPD were really good for reconstruction, but how good are they? So we did some simulation and applied reconstruction algorithm to actually understand how good would LAPPD be compared to conventional PMTs. Those are simulation performed with 130 PMTs and the same number of PMTs plus an additional 5 LAPPDs. And you can see here is the cumulative plot of the vertex resolution that in red, those are the additional 5 LAPPDs plus the PMT. The vertex resolution is improved by a factor 3 from 40 centimeter to 12 centimeter. And I want to stress out that this is really crucial when you're cubic meter big, because this gives you a really good reconstruction of resolution. And I mentioned as well that the reconstructed real angle and the momentum transfer resolution actually improved similarly, as you can see on this plot with only the PMTs and the PMTs plus the LAPPD here. Okay. So now mentioned ANI phase 2, but can we do better than ANI phase 2? And can we actually, can we do better? So first of all, what would be very useful for any kind of experiment, especially ANI, would be to really distinguish between charge current interaction, I mean CCQE events and resonant pion production events. But resonant pion production would give you several tracks from the pion, but given the size of ANI and the fact that most of ANI is only actuated by PMTs, it would be very hard to distinguish them. However, if you think about having several LAPPDs on each side of the tank, you would be able to increase your efficiency to detect those events. So yeah, we would need the ANI on all sides, LAPPDs on all sides of the tank and not just in the front. And another thing that could be useful is to actually get an even better handle on the vertex resolution. So for phase 2, the vertex resolution is going to be obtained using LAPPDs, using the triangle of light that is forward emitted. But you can imagine that if you had some backward lights that would be emitted, an LAPPD, very fast detector, to detect them, then you could actually further constrain your interaction vertex position. However, well, water doesn't do that. Water just gives you trancure flight. But as you heard in the talk before by Gabriel, this new medium, water-based liquid scintillator, or WBLS, that's a mixture of water and liquid scintillator, could allow you to actually have both trancure flight and scintillation light. And that brings me to what we think could be a possible ANI phase 3. An ANI phase 3 with either ANI completely filled with water-based liquid scintillator or with a small vessel filled up with water-based liquid scintillator in ANI, and additional LAPPDs on the outside of the tank. To allow ANI to be sensitive to both neutrons and photons, but also to increase the vertex resolution of the neutron interaction. And this would also actually, ANI in this case, would become an actual test stand for experiment like Watchman and Thea for those experiments to be able to test the reconstruction technique, for example. And also the fact that since they want to use WBLS to test the compatibility of the materials and everything. And I want to stress that basically once phase 2 is ongoing, this is not a major upgrade. This requires loading more LAPPDs, which we can do because we have all possible ports on every side of the tank. And this requires also deploying a small vessel, which we already did during phase 1. All right, and so this is my conclusion now. So, okay, I'm 1 minute late. So, okay, I'm going to do a conclusion, but I think I can just show the slide during the conference. So, let me present you the goals of ANI again. We want to study the multiplicity of anostate neutron from neutron interaction in water. We'll also possibly perform a measurement of the CC inclusive cross-section on water as a function of neutron transfer. And finally, also operate with success LAPPDs in the neutron detector for the first time. Phase 1 was a success, showed us that the neutron background is low enough for phase 2 to be feasible. And we actually are preparing a publication on the phase 1 results. We're moving into phase 2 with more LAPPDs, more tank instrumentation being ready, the mechanical structure that is actually being built at the moment, and we plan taking physics data in 2019. Thank you, and that's it.